finally he proved to be right. He ended up in the insane asylum because he was attacked so vigorously by the consensus. This happened to Galileo. This happens almost every time someone steps forward and says, hey, we're not the center of the universe. That's why it's so dangerous to listen to scientists that say the science is settled. Anyone that says that should be someone that you stop listening to right away.
So if you were in the world, what would you change in our government?
Okay, great.
Would you be the new head of the CDC?
No. You want me to wait for him to?
Yeah.
Well, it's tough. I mean, look, we can't have bumper sticker discussion. You know, in the end, we've got to, and I think that what's really happening here is we've been told there's no debate. I mean, talk about a lack of nuance. This side says there's no debate. And all I've done is show you all the science. I can show you today what happened when they show you a placebo. Oh, wait.
You're right. No, keep going.
No, so.
Do you want to say something, sir?
No.
Yeah, you're okay.
So, I mean, we're talking about nuance, and we can't just have blanket statements. Let's point out something today.
To be fair, I haven't heard you say anything negative about anybody that's vaccine hesitant.
Okay.
Are there mistakes on that side of the conversation? Just to try and find.
Absolutely.
People point at you and they go, he's only that. And I'm trying to
Right.
just tell me if there's more than that.
Sure. I think that there's mistakes on the vaccine hesitant side too. We can't just make blanket statements. In fact, I see people that just say nobody should vaccinate, no time ever, third world. I don't know if that's the case. That's not what I've said. And I've been attacked by people on the anti-vaccine side for shows. I did a show about a great scientist out of Boston that's using a tuberculosis vaccine in multiple trials showing that it can cure type 1 diabetes after 3 years. I find that fascinating that a vaccine is not being used prophylactically but as a drug. And I did a show, I got attacked by many people that said, you're showing that you're pro-vaccine. And I say to people, I'm pro-science. If I've ever mistaken, if anyone's mistaken where I'm coming from, I'm fascinated by science. All I'm doing is presenting the science as I see it. I think we're just as much in danger on the anti-vaccine side of being biased when we look at the situation as pro-vaccine side. In fact, that's where I think the major problem is here. So when I'm asked, how would you do things differently? I don't need to run the world. We have really simple, in fact, Bobby Kennedy and I, we've put together talking points, and when we go and talk to politicians, there are very simple fixes. Number one, we've got to take vaccine safety science out of the CDC here, out of Health and Human Services. Why? Because the CDC's job, as we watch today, is to try and end infectious disease by promoting vaccine uptake in America. The CDC here buys over $5 billion worth of vaccines every year and distributes them. That makes them a marketing arm for the pharmaceutical industry. In addition, when we took liability away in the 1986 Act from the manufacturer, we put it on Health and Human Services, which oversees the CDC. So now our government agency is defending vaccines for the manufacturer against the citizens. And they use Department of Justice lawyers to fight citizens who have been injured by a product. It's one of the few places where the Department of Justice, who usually defends the citizen against manufacturers that are hurting citizens, in this case we turned it on its head and made them defend the manufacturers. So we've got to look at that conflict of interest. How is it that Health and Human Services, when you sue Health and Human Services because you've been injured, you have to go into that courtroom and prove that the vaccine caused your child's injury or your injury to yourself? How do you do it? You have to provide science that shows a connection. Who was supposed to have done that science? Health and Human Services. Literally the defendant in this case. So this would be like being in a murder case where the murderer is getting to do all of your forensics. This is not a system that could ever work. It cannot protect us. So here's the simple fix. We want a National Vaccine Safety Board, just like you have the National Transportation Safety Board or the Nuclear Regulatory Agency. There was a similar problem with them. Boeing was doing all of the investigation on plane crashes, and we said, well, hold on a second. If manufacturers are investigating their own plane crashes, it's odd that we keep hearing that it's pilot error. Maybe we need to create an independent scientific body that's paid well that investigates crashes. We want the same thing for vaccines. We want scientists who are not influenced by the manufacturer, who do not have a job to promote vaccines in the country and around the world, to actually be doing the safety studies. Because a safety study in any other form of science demands skepticism. In fact, a safety study is supposed to challenge the safety, to prove that it's dangerous. It should set out to prove that it's dangerous. We can't find any study like that anywhere in the world. And how are we going to get it when we're told all the time that the consensus of science says that vaccines are safe, that all scientists believe it's the greatest invention of the 20th century? I have a little skepticism that with that bias out there, that any of these scientists are doing a true safety study, a true challenge study against the vaccines. I want challenge studies. And until we get that, I simply want a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study. So that's it. Create a national a national vaccine safety board. Second, if we're told that vaccine injury is 1 in a million, then I think the pharmaceutical industry that's making over $50 billion from vaccines in America alone, I think they can afford that lawsuit. Let's put liability back on the industry. Those two things, I think, will right this ship. Let's think about what we're talking about. We're talking about an industry that knowingly poisons people all the time. The four companies that make most of our childhood vaccines have collectively paid out over $30 billion in damages for killing innocent people. Let me explain. Johnson & Johnson just recently lost a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit because we now know they knew for 50 years that there was asbestos in talcum powder. And the FDA and CDC said it was safe. We were sprinkling talcum powder on our naked babies for 50 years. Now we know we were sprinkling asbestos on them. We're looking at what's happening with Monsanto and an herbicide. That Bayer is also a pharmaceutical company. We now know that that product is causing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and there's going to be billions and billions and billions of dollars paid out. Vions, made by Merck, who makes many of our childhood vaccines, many of them we're discussed here today, it killed over 100,000 people. When we finally sued because we had discovery, we found out they always knew that the drug caused heart attacks. And we saw internal memos and emails to the sales reps that said, don't worry about those doctors that are questioning the safety of Vioxx. We'll hunt them down and destroy them where they work. Those are internal documents we want for every childhood vaccine. We can only get that if we can sue. So you're taking away all of the market forces that would help us evolve this product, and that's what I'm here for. I'm not trying to eradicate the vaccine program. I am a safety advocate, just like Ralph Nader, who wanted seatbelts in cars and airbags and brakes to work and baby cribs to not kill children. I don't want vaccines that kill children if we can avoid it. And the only way we can do that is if we do real safety studies and we actually have liability on the industry so that we can sue and get discovery to find what is really happening in the trials we are not seeing with vaccines. I don't think that's too much to ask. Every other product is being challenged like that except this one. Why is it that we believe that an industry that lies to us about safety on all their other products are like angels when it comes to vaccines, especially the one product they have no liability on? It defies reason. It would actually be pure dumb luck if vaccines ended up being safe, because this industry lies to us all the time in every other circumstance.
So is it the CDC? Is this the only industry within our government that's completely broken? It sounds like this one is really, really broken here.
It's really, really broken.
Are there others that are working, or is the government totally screwed up and we shouldn't trust anything?
I think that if you really, you talked about environmentalism, we're talking about global warming. We know that there are currently people, Donald Trump has put people in the office in the EPA. They're taking away all the environmental protections. We're putting people in office. Our presidents are putting in Exxon employees into the EPA. The FDA has Monsanto lawyers and people that used to work for Monsanto. The CDC here has employees that used to work for Merck, Sanofi Aventis, or they have a revolving door like Julie Gerberding, who used to run the CDC here during the time of the MMR study, which is at the heart of my film Vax. She goes on, after exonerating Merck and the MMR vaccine in what appears to be a very fraudulent study, we have a CDC whistleblower, still works here. She goes on.
Still works here?
Yes, of course he does. Yeah, Dr. William Thompson still works here at the CDC.
Where do you think he's right now today?
I'm sure he's on campus.
You met in person?
I have met him.
Huh.
Yeah.
What do you think of the film?
Well, he seemed to think it was okay. I mean, I think that if I was we only have passed and crossed right through his home.
Huh.
This is where I've met him. And he would say that he appreciates the work that I've done. I think that he thinks if you really looked at the data the way that he had crunched it, that the numbers look differently, but the overall idea of Vax is true. And I've given him every opportunity. I said, look, if you want to come on and clarify what exactly happened in the study from your perspective, my show, The High Wire, is open to you, and I'm sure that there's news agencies all around the world that would looking forward to hearing that. Currently, he won't speak in front of the camera.
There's a lot of children and families with measles in hospitals and clinics around the country. Is there anything you want to say to those families?
Well, first of all, I'd like to know who those are. I mean, I hear about hospitals and clinics, but I don't see any photos. I don't see any reports. I'm not seeing any numbers of how many are actually in hospitals.
So you don't believe there's...
I don't believe anything until I see it, until I see actual numbers and reports. I don't just take assumptions, and I certainly don't take talking points. What I know is that...
Like measles outbreak in New York? Have you like looked into like data points or any?
You're saying like there's a thousand reported measles outbreaks and over 1,000 in the country.
Right.
You don't think any of those are true?
Oh, no, that's not what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm saying, first of all, measles is contagious. There's no doubt about it. Measles is contagious. In fact, I have better insight than most of the news agencies. I'll tell you that there's more than 1,000 in this country. I believe that there's thousands already right now in New York because there's communities that are having measles parties. Why? Because they have laws that are oppressing Hasidic Orthodox Jewish communities. And the same was the case up in Washington, where it was a religious group that didn't believe in vaccinating. When you start passing laws that say we're going to stop you in the street, we're going to quarantine you, you won't be allowed in the synagogue during Passover, which was the law that was attempted to be passed in Rockland County, New York, you suddenly have a group of people that realize, well, hold on a second. You mean once we've had measles, you'll never be able to quarantine us again? And so we have effectively created an epidemic where people are getting the measles on purpose. I've never seen an epidemic where people charge in to get the disease, and that's what's happening here in this country. People don't charge in to get Ebola. People don't charge in to get polio, but they are going out of their way to get the measles because they want the lifelong immunity that it provides.
That happened in Disneyland too?
No, I think Disneyland's a separate incident. You know, I think we're seeing a new anomaly here. In fact, and I think Disneyland, one of the things that's interesting about that is that, you know, more than 30% of the cases were vaccinated individuals. More than half of the cases were adults. So these, you know, and more than 30% of the cases that were genotyped had vaccine strain measles, meaning they got the vaccine, they got the measles from the vaccine. So there's a lot of issues that we're now seeing. We're now getting the truth out of the California outbreak. So when you talk about data coming out of New York, I want to see that. One of the things I want to see is genotype. I want to know.
The data, just so I'm sorry, you changed the data a little bit for me because you were saying I don't know if there are measles, and then you say you do know that there are measles, but it's because they want to get them. So you think that you said
No, let me make this clear.
Okay.
I don't know that people are in hospitals with the measles, is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I don't believe there's people getting the measles. What I don't believe yet is that there's this outrageous number of people. I've heard reporters say there's people on life support for measles. Really? Name one. Like, give me a name of a case. Tell me what hospital they're at. Let me go and investigate, because I'd like to see if that's the case. Right now, until I actually hear about actual cases, this hospital has this many people on life support that it's just a talking point. You know, we've got to back this up. As reporters, we can't just say, hey, medicine's saying that there's people in hospitals. Really? Then what are the numbers? How many are being hospitalized? And for what? Like, we know this. We know out of the Disneyland outbreak that led to, I think there ended up being 644 cases, there wasn't a single case of encephalopathy. Nobody had brain swelling. That was what was reported. Nobody died. And now, when I watch the news, I watch reports that measles is deadly. I think we have to question what we call deadly. I mean, so is drinking water, for that matter. Every once in a while, someone drinks too much water at some time and they die. Does that mean that water is deadly? When we're talking about something deadly, we're now, we're consolidating reports from England and Australia and Israel and America in order to find a death. I saw a report, I think a news report, we now have someone that's died in Europe from the measles. A fully vaccinated kid who was in a school that had 98% vaccine uptake in that school, and yet the headline still reads, the anti-vaxxers are at fault for this kid's death. Is it possible that vaccine failure is responsible for his death? Is it possible that the vaccines
don't even work?
Huh?
You're saying the vaccines don't
I think there's a potential that vaccines are waning. In fact, there's more and more science showing that the vaccine efficacy is waning. I think we know this simply by looking at the schedule itself. When we first had an MMR vaccine, that one MMR vaccine was supposed to last the rest of our lives. Well, it did. And then we went to 2 MMR vaccines. And now I've said at multiple meetings here where they're considering adding a 3rd vaccine in college, mostly because the mumps portion of the vaccine is not working. We have a naval ship that has been stuck out at sea because the fully vaccinated individuals on that ship are getting the mumps. So we have vaccine failure right before our eyes. Why aren't we investigating that? Why is that not part of the story? And if 31 or 38% of the cases in Disneyland had vaccine strain measles, why aren't we asking, can the vaccine cause measles? If that's the case, it's a huge number. We're nearing half the cases got the measles from the vaccine. And if vaccine failure, if 30% of the people that were typed in Disneyland ended up being vaccinated, then that shows us that there is certainly vaccine failure amongst a large part of the population. All of these are to the nuance that I was asked to discuss. This is the nuance we should be looking at. To simply say the MMR vaccine works, actually, no, all reports are flying in the face of that. So we won't know what's happening in New York until we get genotyping and we actually look back at what happened in this case.
So if I got an invitation to go to a hospital in New York for a family that has measles, you'd go with me?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm not trying to hide any information. I am just like any reporter. We should be looking at this. I want to know how many serious injuries take place. I want to know how many deaths there are. Those are things that all paint, into this picture. But we've had multiple outbreaks over the last decade or so. In fact, there was an outbreak 2 years after they said that measles had been eradicated from America. In fact, there's this constant, it goes like this, every 3 or 4 years, measles increases, and it's increasing all around the world.
Can I ask what vaccines you had?
I have had only one vaccine in my entire life. I was not vaccinated as a child, but as an adult, I almost cut off my 3 fingers with a table saw while I was working on a doctor's television show. And when they were sewing it back together, they said, you need